Well, if you've been following along with the series recently about the chandeliers, how to make your own chandeliers out of junk, you may have got to the point where you want to make fake glass chimney glass. Now, the technique I used involved using a 3D printed mould and then a silicone rubber former which goes inside the shrink wrap tubing. But a lot of people have been asking how to do this without a 3D printer because 3D printers aren't always accessible. And I did wonder about this at the very beginning, but of course, for my own purposes, it was just easy to do it with a 3D printer. So once a few people were interested, I've gone to the shed and I've done a little experiment and I've tried different things and I've come up with a new idea. Now, this idea is actually better than the old idea. This one works a lot better. I think it's easier to do, it costs less, and it's just faster. I'm using the original mould here, the 3D printed mould, but that's only because I want to make something that resembles the same size and shape as the original so I can compare it with the old and new one. So the basic technique here is to put plasticine, normal children's or modelling plasticine, around the end of a pencil or a paintbrush. In this case, this is the end of a paintbrush that just happens to be roughly the right diameter for the mould. So I'm slowly building up the plasticine into a kind of bottle shape to almost emulate what we had before. Now, I'm not spending a lot of time on this. I'm just messing about, trying to get it roughly to shape. It's just a proof of concept at the moment. It is just experimental. So once I've got something that looks roughly like what we had before, then I'm going to jump onto the next part, which is basically where I heat up a piece of shrink wrap tubing over the pencil or paintbrush just to form that shape. So everything's just a rough approximation. I'm not measuring, I'm not working the scale or anything. It's just to see if this concept works. It's just to see if it works, really. And like before, instead of the rubber, instead of the silicone rubber bit, I'm using the clay on the end of the pencil, which is actually a lot easier to do because my fingers, they're nowhere near the flame, so it's a lot easier. And I'm gently heating this up because I'm worried at the moment that the clay might melt. And if it does melt, of course, the whole shape will go and it'll be game over. But gently as I heat this up, the heat is absorbed by the plastic tubing, and as it closes in on that shape, on that clay shape, it is going to get quite hot, but my feeling is that it'll contain it. It'll contain the shape because the clay won't be able to go anywhere once that tubing gets to a certain kind of tightness around that pencil or brush. So it is taking a little bit longer than the other one. The other one I didn't mind. I could just blast it with as much heat and let it shrink straight away. But I'm being a little bit more cautious, I think, with this one. But as you can see, it is forming the shape, and the clay has held. I mean, it hasn't melted away yet. Now, I thought about different things. I thought about using, candle wax and all sorts of things, but that would just melt away. Plasticine. We use a lighter with plasticine sculptures sometimes when we want to gloss the surface, just to give it a nice smooth finish. And that's what's happening with this after a while. So all those imperfections, fingerprints, nail marks and scratches that you probably didn't notice on the camera, but all of them, they've kind of faded away because this thing has kind of stretched over the front of it. So there you go. After a bit more heat, you can see that it definitely does have a shape to it, and it looks like it's kept its shape too. So all I need to do now is remove the pencil, and I think by removing the pencil we're going to have clay, a hollow clay cavity, which we can easily get something in to sort of scoop out, or actually I did find a really cool way of doing this. As you can see, I'm sticking the thing back in there, thinking that I might be able to squeeze that clay out from one end to the other, but that's not the way to do it. The way to do it is so much more simple, and you're going to love it. As you can see that it does look a lot like the original too. It's still a bit bigger. I will need to cut a little piece from it, but as I'm rolling it now like this, I'm rolling it, and I'm finding that the clay rolls up like a sausage inside, and I don't even need to poke this with the brush. And there it goes. You know, you just roll it between your fingers until the clay just rolls into a sausage and falls out, which is great. It does leave a little bit of a residue inside, but that was easily cleaned using household washing up detergent. I used Fairy Liquid, which is a popular one in the UK. Now, before I go and wash this thing, I'm just going to try and chop it to roughly the size the original was. So it's not something I'm measuring accurately. It's just an approximation, just eyeballing this really, because it's just a proof of concept. If it works like this, then it has some potential, and it looks like it does have potential because it looks fairly similar, doesn't it? So there I go. I've been to wash this thing, and it's not as clear as the other one. It could have done with a better wash, but you know, I haven't got any bottle cleaners or anything like that. I'm just using a paintbrush with a bit of detergent. But maybe if I were to use some paper or maybe a bit of sponge, it would work better. I'm just going to try sticking it on there now, and oh my god, I can almost not know. I almost not tell which one's which. You know, that looks quite convincing. Yeah, so that's the original, and the one we've just made is on there. So the shape looks very similar. The whole thing looks really good, I think, considering that we've just done it in like 5 minutes using a bit of clay. So that quite impressed me actually, because I didn't expect it to be as good, and I thought, I wonder if we can take this even further. I wonder if we can do something else with this as well. So you will need to clean it up and whatnot, but I thought maybe we can use a drill, a normal cordless drill, and stick the whole paintbrush in the drill and use it like a lathe. So I've gone and I've put some more plasticine on the end of this brush. I've put a big fat lump of it actually, and I'm going to see if I can sort of imagine a potter's wheel and try and kind of lathe this into a funny shape, in my head I'm thinking about the big round spherical type of lanterns, you know, the fancy ones, perhaps with the curved bits on the glass. Now, my stick, my brush is really wobbly. It's not even, as you can see. It's wiggling around all over the place. But after doing this, I think it would be a really good way of doing it. It's got a massive amount of potential for this really, If we could have a straighter piece of wood so that we would have less wobble, you could easily get some nice shapes with this. Now, the difference with this is that doing it with a silicone, the silicone could only get to a certain shape because you're trying to squeeze something out of a really tight space. But doing it this way, you're kind of deforming the shape. You see, when you remove that pencil or the paintbrush, you're able to deform that clay and squeeze it into a different shape. And I think that's absolutely fantastic for this, because it means we can make shapes with deeper undercuts. We can make balls, almost spherical balls, and that's great for some of these lanterns. The only thing that's letting it down really is my sculpting here, but I'm wetting my fingers with this plasticine sometimes to try and sort of shape it and have it not catch on my fingers. But I am going to try using different tools, like you would with a normal lathe, so to sort of carve in shapes. And this would work, I'm sure it would work, if that was a nice straight bit of wood that wasn't wobbling all over the place like it is. But of course, you can work on that yourself. You can improvise and try and improve on this, because it is just a proof of concept. It's just something that maybe could need a bit more work before the technique is usable. But I think, look at that for inspiration. I think you could easily do this. It almost feels like I'm doing something on a potter's wheel like this. And saying that, you could probably use potter's clay. It's water soluble, so you might find that it takes the heat better, and you might find that it can be washed out instead of squeezed out like a sausage. But it's something to experiment with. So this is the bit, isn't it? This is the bit that we're looking for. Now this the diameter of the clay here is quite big. It's about maximum size for this tube. So I'm giving it a bit more heat, and I'm not really caring so much with this one because I haven't done so much work on it. I'm just having a look really to see if we have any effect. Now, I'm pretty sure that this will work exactly like the smaller version, and if it does, I'm pretty sure that we should be able to get deeper undercuts and a better effect if we did this differently. If we did this a little bit with a nicer sculpted part. Of course, you could just sculpt it by hand if you're really good. I mean, you probably are good if you're watching this video, because it's very arts and crafty, isn't it? And there you can see that I've given that clay a bit too much heat. It's taken too much heat, and I can see that it's bubbling. It's almost trying to come out of the top, but it's still retained the shape. The plastic has retained the shape, and that's what I mean about this plastic tubing being quite good for imperfections. It's not picking up any of those imperfections. And it's quite hot. I'm guessing the clay inside is going to be even hotter. So it's just normal plasticine. Good old-fashioned plasticine. Now, this is quite a lot bigger than the other jar, the other bowl, the other chimney, should I say. But I think it will take a lot more undercuts. So I think this technique, you're going to really like this. So if you do like it, if it was useful to you, then let me know. Hit the like button, subscribe, because we'll probably make a lot more content like this. And Of course, if you've made your own from this technique, I'd love to see them. I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to hear about anything you did differently, or perhaps how it went, just in general. So it's a cool little technique, isn't it? So yeah, it just rubs around like this, squeezes between my thumb and finger, and it just turns into a cylinder and falls out. It's so simple, so easy. Look at that. So I won't be using silicone or 3D printed parts to make these again. This is much better. Yeah, so thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that, like, subscribe, or don't. It's up to you. Don't mind, But there we go. I hope it's been useful for you. Thanks for watching.